All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Inside In Tennis Podcast. Mitch Michals here, all part of the Believe Network. Tons of great content there as we continue along in the tennis season. This podcast is available on all your platforms as well. 2025 tennis season, road to Roland Garros, a lot to discuss. We're going to look backwards, look forwards with a guest, a friend of mine at this point, someone who has covered the game extensively, an MC, an interviewer, a hedgehog owner. I think I got everything in there. Blair Henley, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mitch. Yeah, sad news. Glitter the hedgehog is still with us, but perhaps not for long.
Oh, okay.
Struggling with some health issues at the moment. So prayers up for Glitter Sparkles Henley.
It's a fun journey. You know, if it's at the end, my condolences, but it's been funny. And you're very open about a lot of things too, right? Like this was something, and that's maybe one of the reasons why, and we can get into it too, Blair, like people relate to you and enjoy the content you produce as an MC, master of ceremonies, interviewer, is you're just open, even the bad moments, even the fails too, right? Because there are some of those too.
Oh, there are many, many a fail. Yes, I do try to keep it real, only in my job, but just in life, because there are many things as a tennis host that can go wrong in a day. So I do try to keep it real on that front. And, as long as it doesn't result in me going viral for the wrong reasons, I'm okay
Well,
with it.
because we joked about it too. Like you've had the moniker ATP Tour and covered that show that airs on Tennis Channel and other platforms, and the SIF creative guys and everybody does a great job with that. But it had reporter as your lower third, like Blair Henley reporter, and I got a nice little smile out of that. But it was fun to see you getting that, getting the insight, the analyst role, especially when the one episode was about the next gen, the race to Saudi Arabia last year. I know you were hands on with that and seeing what that run meant, and now seeing these next gen are just like storming and taking over the tennis in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that was funny. One of the things that I remember saying when I was doing the interviews as they put together those pieces was that the next gen ATP finals is the closest thing we have in tennis to a crystal ball. It is unbelievable how reliable that event has been in predicting future success on the ATP tour. And we're not talking future success within like 5 years. We're potentially talking future success within like 5 weeks if you look at Joao
Mhm.
Fonseca this year, Lerner, Tien, Jakub Benchik, Feast. It's just absolutely incredible.
Last week's challenger champ Alex Mickelson, just
That's
another one.
right.
It is pretty crazy, and I think look, tennis gets a lot of criticism in a lot of areas, a lot of it deserved, I think we can say. But let's give credit too. I think moving it to where it was, and I wasn't even on board necessarily, but making the next gen later, it's really like a warm up runway into the season. And I don't think I don't think that's a coincidence why these players played so well to start 2025.
Yeah, and there's enough of a break, I feel like, between sort of the end of the season to the start of the next gen ATP finals that again we're used to in tennis having a 2 week off season. So people are like, oh, like a fresh event with different
Yeah.
rules and how cool. No, they've done a great job. I do think in general it'd be so nice if the schedule were slimmed down a little bit, but there was legitimate excitement about that event in particular at the end of 2024.
So for people out there too that haven't listened to Blair on this show or come in contact with you before, as the host MC, they might not know about your story, tennis background at Rice and everything that you accomplished. And without getting into that, I did want to get into one thing is that you are also part of a dying breed, the one-handed backhand club.
Yes, I am. What is it? One HBH forever.
Is that well, it's interesting too because it is a dying breed, and I wanted to know just the background of how you as a player developed that shot. It is pretty funny, fascinating that a lot of your action shots back in the day is just ready position, one hand backhand cocked, hand on the throat of the racket. So that was in a lot of ways your calling card.
That it is true. I will say it gave me little did I know that I would ever need some sort of calling card or a trademark, whatever you want to call it, but it did sort of become that. And I had a one-handed backhand for my entire life. I did not have a two-hander as a 5-year-old and then switched to a one-hander, and people thought my dad was crazy. My dad is sort of an old school mentality, but I am so thankful for my one-hander now. That said, I have talked to enough
Hmm.
players with one-handers. I think of Chris Eubanks and Alex Kovacevic. I mean, Chris will tell you, he's told me many times, like, no shot if I had to do it again would I
Yeah.
ever have started playing with a one-hander. And so like I have two girls and I'm teaching them two-handers.
Mhm.
But much in part, thanks in
Yeah.
part to Chris Eubanks, who was like, don't do it.
Yeah.
But I will say though, it is incredibly reliable. I think in some ways using one hand, you're so reliant on the timing. And because of that, there's just sort of, you have to it has to be simple.
Yeah.
It has to be simplified.
Mhm.
And I think the more simple your stroke can be as, not a professional tennis player, the more repeatable it is. And the more
Yeah.
repeatable it is, the better you can be at, whether it's the rec level, the club level, the college level. And so I'm thankful
Yeah.
for it in hindsight.
Yeah, you hear these stories, right? Pete Sampras switching, having to lose, having to learn to lose and then get better. I talked to Alex Stevenson earlier this year, and she said her coach was like, "Okay, you're going to be tall. I think one hand will be good." And she's like, "I went from winning to losing for like the next 3 years." So
Yeah.
there's an adjustment. Yeah, and the last thing on that, Blair, did you have to maybe like, because you're right-handed, right? Like, did you have to
Yeah.
get extra time on the gym doing those curls on the left hand, or were you just worried about the symmetry being off?
Well, you know what's so funny? I will never forget this. Again, my dad
Yeah.
is still to this day a club pro, and so he has had many pros who have worked under
Mhm.
him over the years. And I think I was probably 9 years old, and there was one pro who had a kid who wanted to hit a one-hander on his court, and he was trying to shift the kid to a two-hander, and my dad said, if he wants to hit with a one-hander, let him hit a one-hander. And the pro said, well, he's not strong enough. And my dad trotted me out there on the court, like silly 9-year-old, to hit one-handers because I really do think it's a little bit of a myth that you have to be super strong
Right.
to hit a one-handed backhand. I think so much of it is
Yeah.
having good footwork, getting set at your base, and then the timing, learning how to sort of wrap. My dad told me so a million times, wrap and unwrap, wrap and unwrap. And
Hmm.
if you can time it well, you don't necessarily have to have above average strength.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear that because it also speaks to your work ethic and your practice schedule and how much you were just had to drill in responsively. I was going to say too, I had this written down, but there was this great article that came out, about 14 years ago about a woman who was a professional, was a great college player, and she married an athlete, but learned to work smarter because of him a little bit. Yeah,
Totally.
familiar story and written by
Absolutely.
yourself, I know.
That's right.
Yeah, it's just it's a funny thing though to know that there's still people being taught that, and I think there's still positives, but you have to come to terms with the what ifs, right? Like what would have been not just yourself, but Chris Eubanks, other players that if they had that two-handed backhand, how
Mhm.
different things could have been. So it's always the what ifs.
Yeah, well, you could pull the Aiden Mayo. I don't know if you're familiar. The two-hander on the return
Hmm.
and the one-hander once the point starts, which I think is fascinating. I have
Hmm.
also heard Billie Jean King espouse the virtues of learning both,
Hmm.
and because that is really where people say the one-hander is the biggest detriment to your game is on the return.
Hmm.
Um, and listen, my two-hander is tragic to look at. So that would not have been an option for me. But for some of the people who learn two-handers first and then
Hmm.
switch, I think that would be a great plan is
Hmm.
hit the two-hander on the return. And if you want to go to the one-hander because it does give you more reach. I know that probably my slice is better than it would have otherwise been
Yeah.
if I had had a two-hander. So yeah, just learn both. It's as easy as
Just
that.
Just learn both. Well, the tennis season in 2025, and I feel like we've been trending upward as a sport, as a game, but I've heard the phrase more this year than ever before, Blair, that tennis is having a moment. And when I say that, what's the first thing that's come to mind this year? I have a couple things written down, but I want to know what stands out about, wow, this is a real moment for tennis.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is the fact that every brand and its cousin has a tennis club merch line. Like Lululemon has a tennis club. You've got the Sporty and Rich. I mean, you just Google it, and it seems like every brand has been taking advantage of the fashion aspect of tennis and the aesthetic benefits of the game. I
Hmm.
mean, you put a model on a tennis court with a wooden racket, and it's like just, I mean, you don't even have to do it. You don't have to even
No,
move your
no, you
dog
don't.
over. It's like you've got your picture right there. So that is really the first thing that I think of just because I'm consuming. Like when I'm
Hmm.
on Instagram, which I use mostly for, aesthetic, like clothing, whatever
Yeah.
inspiration, that stuff is everywhere. And I think a lot of that was buoyed by challengers and that rollout last year. So I think obviously tennis
Yeah.
has been aesthetically wonderful for quite some time, but I know that that really was a boost in terms of the fashion side of things.
Hmm.
But gosh, in terms of the actual tennis, so we're just talking 2025.
Yeah, just the last couple months.
Well, Alex Eala, I thought was like a massive moment just in terms of tennis being such a big deal in a place where it might not have been that big of a deal before. And I think anytime you can sort of incorporate, like
Hmm.
even the UTS event in where was that? In like that Coliseum looking I'm forgetting exactly where it was.
Was that in
Regardless,
Spain? Was that in Spain?
Spain, France, something like
Or
that.
somewhere over
Anyway,
there.
areas where you don't normally, where we are not, those of us who work in tennis are maybe not used to seeing the game played in the, in the Philippines, like goodness, talk to the social media managers were
Crazy.
rejoicing. And any post on Alex Fiala, it was like the
Hmm.
numbers were absolutely insane.
Yeah, we had yeah, there's the amount of growth, and even here on this show, it's like passion. It's also need to maybe learn a little bit more. I think a lot of fans are like, "Oh, this is a crazy sport," but they're just loyal to their athletes. So it's good to see representation in Niala's case. And yeah, the fashion's great. I'm overwhelmed too. I got to the point we were talking walking through the Indian Wells souvenir shop, which is amazing, by the way. But there's so many choices. There's so many kits and outfits, and everybody is being bold. I'll say that might be the way I would describe it, is how bold some of these brands are being, and deservedly so.
Listen, it was H&M walked so the rest of us could run. If you remember
Thomas Burdick.
Thomas Burdick
Yeah.
back in the day, and when H&M got into the tennis fashion game, and everyone was like, "What? What is this? Like, it's
Yeah.
not Adidas or Nike or Lotto or Diadora. Like, what is
That
this?" Like, I'll never forget his like laser
mhm.
light H&M polo top at
that
the US Open. And now it's like every brand feels like they can make a tennis line. And I think it's so cool.
that is and Indian Wells might be the origin of where I think tennis, and every year it just seems like the boom place where things
Mhm.
blow up. And I think, yeah, my other answer to that question, Blair, is you had on one hand Timothée Chalamet and what Kardashian
Kylie Jenner,
and
yes.
Kylie, yeah, Kylie Jenner, and then you also had a what was it, a French bulldog in a Bjorn Borg polo, and I thought that might have been the moment where we got to the apex of tennis having a moment.
That is probably true. I actually made and credit to the brilliant videographer Drew Carlisle at Indian Wells, who, much like last year when Zendaya and Tom Holland went to Indian Wells, he staked out Timothée Chalamet and Kylie Jenner, and Kendall was also there from the other side of the
Yeah,
stadium, a long lens for
yeah.
the entirety of the time that they were there, and got
Hmm.
some footage that was shared all over the world. But my favorite part of that particular moment in, just sort of the legend of the sport of tennis was Timothée Chalamet standing up, and you could so clearly read his lips saying that was a bad miss.
Yeah.
That was a bad miss. And I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, like he is into this. Does he have a clue of what he's watching? I don't know, but he was playing the part."
Well, I remember one thing about that. It was a Holger Rune match, so I don't know who hit the shot or
Yes.
whatever, and I know Holger won, but it was funny. Yeah, and he's a big sports fan, but it also brings up another point, Blair, is that in person it is a different ball game. There's so many people. I can speak to my own circle that when they finally see tennis, they become hooked, and you're one of the people that maybe converts more than most.
I hope so. Listen, I will preach the benefits of live tennis viewing we'll shout it from the rooftops. But yeah, it is a big difference from watching on TV, particularly if you can have, again, not I feel like I'm biased here, but like the grandstands of the world and court 17, which is right here, which is where I started off. If you could have one of your first tennis experiences in a stadium like that versus maybe Stadium One at Indian Wells, or the biggest stadium in Miami, or Arthur Ashe Stadium, I
Mm.
just think it adds so much because you are right there. You are so close. Even if you have no idea what you're
Yeah,
looking at, you can feel the speed and you can see the athleticism and the facial reactions of the players. It's the coolest. I mean,
it
it's the
is. And I
coolest.
just, I'm sad when I see players outgrow the grandstand. It almost happens in real time. You were in Miami when maybe one of the questionable decisions tennis made was trying to put that Fonseca match on the grandstand. As I talked to Nico Pereira on this show, he was like, "Those weren't tennis fans. It's like those were they got
Yeah.
overwhelmed by sports fans, but Brazilians that were just passionate." And it was a scene that cooler heads did prevail. But yeah, that was nuts.
Yeah, I definitely made the announcement that that match was moved from the from our locked booth
That's crazy.
just in case, because I felt they did the right thing in terms of the being able to accommodate the most possible fans, and they were able to get, I think, everybody in when all was said and done. But I totally felt for the people who were there in their Brazil jerseys at 10 a.m., right when the gates opened, and just to get good seats, like probably hadn't used the restroom in 6 hours. I felt for them. That was
Yeah.
a tough moment. But live and learn. Fonseca is not going to be on grandstand ever again. I was pumped for it. It was very sad when he got booed, selfishly, but it was probably the right call.
So we got more with Blair Henley here on the Inside in Tennis podcast, talking about her tennis experiences in 2025 and some other storylines. And one of the ones, since we've talked, that I wanted to pick your brain about was a pretty cool concept down under, that blue zone coverage in Australia, because tennis and sports coverage in general is looking for new ways and fresh ways to cover and alter that fan experience. I thought the blue zone was pretty cool with some player interviews, how it was covered, and a lot of different moving parts and moving hosts. But what was your experience like in Australia at the Blue Zone?
Oh, thanks, Mitch. I loved it, and I'm so glad you saw it. I think that's always the challenge with a new product is having people making sure people know where to find it. And is everyone going to want to consume a live stream product on YouTube? No, but that is one of the things I think that Tennis Australia does so incredibly well is they know that tennis fans cover a wide range of demographics, and they really dedicate themselves to covering each little pocket. And when I say little, I mean, they have 2 point whatever million subscribers on
Right.
YouTube. So it's not little, but that is a portion of the tennis fandom that hasn't always been serviced particularly well. So the fact that they gave us the freedom to do that and to kind of say, hey, there are no rules, like go out, have fun, do whatever you want with guests. When Dasha Kazakina comes on set and decides she wants to stay through our break and stay for an entire other segment, they're
Yeah.
like, in my ear, they were like, is she staying? Is she staying? I'm like, I think she's staying.
Yeah.
So she stayed for an entire extra segment, and we had the freedom to do that. And so that is what made the Blue Zone, in my opinion, so cool. And I think now that we've done it once, there was so much excitement at the end of that, thinking, okay, now that we sort of got through it and we saw what worked and what didn't work, the idea looking forward to the future, the ideas that I have, like could do this, could do that. And I know that we had such an incredibly creative team there that I hope Blue Zone, I hope that was sort of the proof of concept and we can grow it along the way.
I do think that players are more receptive. Most players are more receptive to new ideas because there's so much routine. There's so many of the same, things that they have to do. So I do think a new idea in a lot of ways is pretty good. And you saw that with some of the players like Badosa, Fernandez, Shelton. I think that was pretty good.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say too, and shout out to TA, is they do it right. If they're going to try a new idea, they go all in. And we had an incredible studio, and we actually caught the reactions of a few players when they walked in. It's like, oh, this is not what I thought the Blue Zone was. Like, this is a full studio, lights, monitors, blue couches, props
Yeah.
everywhere. So they went all out. And I think when the player senses that,
Hmm.
it is a step, it's a
Hmm.
benefit to us, and just in terms of the way that they treat that type of time allotment.
I did. I saw that one specific one with Badosa walking in, like her eyes kind of like, surveying the scene. Which
Yeah,
I should say, she wasn't able to play today. We hope health wise. I know she's been
I
going through a lot.
know.
It's tough.
Gosh,
It's tough
that
to,
stuff.
yeah. And, I got the chance to meet her last year, interview her on the show, and it was, cool. She was able to have her moment, the US Open and in Australia, especially. But yeah, the injury bug can be brutal, and you just hope that she can find a way to keep going if it's possible.
I know. Yeah, back stuff just makes me nervous because so often it's just out of your control. And back surgery, it's not like back surgery is an easy thing to recover from. So
Mhm.
yeah, prayers up for her.
Well, when you're talking about, when you're in the process of interviewing players, because you've gotten a lot of compliments, not just from myself, but for your interviews and getting players to open up, do you find that it's more of a organic style? Because I think the best compliment I can give you and a compliment I try to get myself is you are prepared, but you don't act like you present the questions like it's not routine, like it's very conversational. So is that a practice process that you do beforehand? Are you kind of mimicking interviews in the mirror? How does that process work to get such good answers?
Well, thank you, first of all. And sometimes, honestly, it's just luck.
Hmm.
Sometimes you can ask a very basic question and get a fantastic answer. It's like, ah, that was nice. And sometimes you can ask a question, you're like, this is a great question, and it totally falls on its face. So sometimes there is, for sure, not to sound too much like a player in a post-match interview, but sometimes there is luck involved. My process is I generally go in with a plan A and then try to listen to their answers. And if it takes us somewhere else, then we go to that other place. The challenge is always, and this is something that people don't realize on the other side of things, is there is a time limitation. And so there's always the fear, like, oh, there's so many times when I would love to ask a follow up, or I would love to sort of see where something takes me, but I know that I just don't have the time freedom to do that, because now we have those flash interviews on court. If it's an ATP match, often ATP media is on court. And then you could have two more flash interviews on court in addition to that. And you are supposed to have 10 minutes from handshake until the next player walks on court. So that I wish, sometimes when I see a Jim Courier like 6 minute interview, I'm like so jealous. I'm like,
Yeah.
I never. Um, it's,
Yeah.
Jim deserves a 6 minute
Hmm.
interview. Don't get me wrong, but man, am I jealous sometimes, because sometimes you just need to be able to sort of work your way in to see where it's going to go.
Yeah, when you've won, I think 2 Australian Opens, you kind of get the luxury of down under,
Yeah,
he's the best too. I say
he's
that
the
in jest.
best.
Also, yeah, it's that glare, right? You don't want the glare from handlers and comms teams. Like, all right, time's up.
Or
You're in your
somebody's in
ear,
your
yeah,
ear and then you
yeah.
get yelled at and then it goes up the
Uh-huh.
chain, and that, yeah, yeah. Believe me, I've been on the other end of that. But one thing that I still remember when it comes to how to do a good interview is, it was one of the first tournaments I ever did in Delray Beach, and an older fan, which I get lots of
Del
unsolicited
Rey.
feedback in
Yeah,
Delray. Yeah,
yeah.
just anywhere
Right.
really. But and I'm always very, I always
Mhm.
generally like interacting with
Uh-huh.
fans if they have something to say about a question or an interview or whatever. But this man was telling me, it was very long-winded, but I got the gist that he was friends with Larry King at some point in his
Wow.
history. And he said, and the thing that Larry always did well is that he listened to the answer. And that is really the difference that I have seen. That was obviously many, many years ago, but the very best interviewers are listening to their subject's answer to see where they go next. And when I first started off, I had my three questions and they were in my mind and I was like, blip, blip. I mean, they could have dropped a bomb midway through the second answer and I might not have even heard what they said because I was trying to remember what my third question was. So as I've done more of that, I've really tried to grow in terms of listening to what the person says and taking it from there.
Yeah, it's a real skill. It comes with experience too, and also knowing that not every show, not every interview is going to be a home run. There's going to be some that you're like, okay, I could have done that better, but
Mm.
it's all a process. And yeah, and you don't know who you're going to interview, whether it's tennis players, whether it's legends, or whether in your kind of home event, it's a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader. So you never know.
Which was the highlight of my Dallas Open. I am not going to lie.
That was an interesting one though, right? I mean, it was something you had talked about, and we had talked about on the show, that upgrade, like the tennis schedule and calendar changing with Dallas being a 500 event. You're very familiar with the city, and then they play at that Ford Center Cowboys facility practice site, and yeah, 500 event with some pomp and circumstance. It was cool to see it. It's always cool. We're biased as Americans to see bigger tournaments in the States, but I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and one thing I heard very recently, and I knew you could sort of tell as it was happening, but going into that event obviously took a lot of buy-in from the Cowboys. That whole event was done in conjunction with their organization. But you don't know what they're going to think when it's all said and done. These people had likely never seen a tennis tournament before, had no idea what that really meant for them. Apparently, they were thrilled.
Yeah.
They much like we were saying, like once you see it in person and you see how exciting it is, you're pumped. It's like, well, okay, I can't wait till we get to do this again. And so to have the buy-in from a brand like the
Mhm.
Cowboys that also
Yeah.
has the financial backing
Right.
of the Cowboys is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, they had a history in Dallas. I think that was where it was an old McEnroe O'Connor's match where it got a little heated. And, I bring that up because heated handshakes are coming back into norm. I feel like every other week there's something. There was that Bellucci Zoomer one where it was like a fake
Yeah.
handshake. And so I love it personally, but, I know it's spicy to say the least.
I love a spicy handshake. Give me all the spice. I always think it's so interesting that some people get so bothered
Hmm.
by that. Like also I don't blame a person for not wanting to act like they're going to shake hands with their, great uncle at the net. Like I am not thrilled after
That you
a
just
tough
lost.
loss.
Yeah.
Like, shake hands and move on. Some people are purists in the sense that, you need to hug them, the men guys need to
The
tap them
Nadal.
on, do the
Yeah.
chest tap. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I would not be doing the chest tap.
No.
So I am fine with just a basic handshake.
Yeah, that's really all we need. And then, another tournament where I wanted your, on the more serious side, your thoughts on, because every year you get to cover the U.S. Clay Court Championships down in Houston, and this year was great. We didn't have the weather worries we had 2 years ago. It was great, 8 for 8 in Americans in the quarterfinals. And then, really, one of the coolest stories of the year, Jenson Brooksby won that title. After coming out with his, autism reveal of what he had, and really, it wasn't just the title, the first of his career, in the position that he was lower on the rankings, but all the people that he inspired to really say, like, I have this, I've realized this, and that he, inspired to come out and speak out was really cool. And I thought that was one of the highlights, I'm sure, of your year, but also the tennis year.
Yeah, it really was, and I hope I'm hoping, and I haven't read it yet actually, but I saw that he just did a first person piece for ATP Tour.com. So I need to read that. But yeah, I hope that sort of broke through outside of the little tennis bubble because it is such an incredible story. But the thing that stood out to me about his run was obviously not only the comeback story. There's the devil wrist surgery. There was the doping infraction side of things. Like it was he had a wild couple of years. So not only to be able to come back from that, so that was sort of part A. Then he explains that he is on the spectrum and how he was nonverbal until the age of 4. But for me personally, as the someone who I'm guessing I probably did his first ever post-match interview in Newport. I think that was his tour level debut, Newport, maybe 2021?
I
20,
think that's
no,
right.
2021? Does that sound
Around
right?
then.
Um, and to see his growth in terms of even talking to me and connecting with the crowd from that pro debut through to Houston was so incredible. And just the lightness, he's also made changes in terms of his team. He's no longer with the coach he was with from the time he was a young kid. He's with Rhyne Williams, who I absolutely love. Like, you couldn't get two more different personalities. Like, Ryan is out fishing any chance, he and Tommy Paul, they don't fish. Maybe sometimes they fish together. I have no idea. I do know that they compare like fishing hauls. Like, I have seen them looking at fishing pictures together. But Ryan is just so, I think he's a really great tennis mind, but he is so laid back in terms of his vibe. And I think that has really changed the way that Jenson sort of presents himself on court. Like, I remember in Dallas a few years ago, he was close to getting defaulted. He chucked a racket. It
Oh, yeah.
came so close to a person. Like, it wasn't, he had sort of those moments of extreme anger on court, as many players do. He was a different person in Houston. And so to see that pay off, not only just with how he seems to be feeling personally, but then also in his tennis, was pretty darn cool.
It's very cool to see. Very supportive of his journey, and yeah, just to keep it going. I think he's got the right mindset too, and he realizes there's still more work to be done. But awesome to see him back in the mix. And yeah, the fishing side of thing. I mean, the other highlight was Tommy Paul, Colton Smith. Like, you had the country walkout songs on lockdown. It was those two. I mean, he'll be on the boat too, Colton, I'm sure.
Oh my gosh, that was pretty darn amazing. I loved, by the way, also that Houston did the sort of walkout songs. If we had a longer walkout, but really they were more like warm up songs. But Tommy Paul was hunting and fishing and loving every day, and Colton Smith was Hard Living by Chris Stapleton. So
But it's a crazy thing too, because Colton can really play, but I've never heard more like that guy's a tennis player comments about first glance. So,
which is great.
Yeah.
I think, as you mentioned, having a calling card, a trademark, having a shtick, big fan. I feel like many more people knew who JJ Wolf was because at the beginning he had a mullet than they might have otherwise. So Colton Smith, you rock. You rock the tat sleeve, the hat, the whole look.
Yeah.
It was great.
It was the mullet. It was also a U.S. Open slow-mo shot in like a 95-degree day where he's just watering that thing down and it's glistening. So, yeah, of course. And then, I wanted to touch on Madrid too, because we talk about people we're happy for. I don't think, and I'd have to look back and really scratch my memory bank, Blair, but I'd have to really think of a time where more people in the tennis community collectively were happier than they were for Casper Ruud to win his first Masters title.
And I mean, we were two of them, I assume. Yeah, he just is so lovely. Like, that's the word that comes to mind. He is unfailingly polite. I don't know if you saw that piece. I think it was that ATV Media / Tennis TV did in Madrid, where
the car,
I was annoyed, and I was not in the car. So for those who didn't see it, they had an actor playing the driver who, was,
it was a Practical Jokers prank by demeanor and Bolter were behind it, but it was basically like Impractical Jokers.
Yes. And so he is just chatting away with these ridiculous fun facts to these players on their ride from the site to their hotel. And I just was like getting uncomfortable. The secondhand embarrassment that I was feeling watching it was extreme. And yet Casper just smiled and was so polite the whole way through, despite the fact that I'm sure humoring a stranger, which is what these famous people have to do so often throughout the course of one single day. He just could not have been more lovely. And that really is the Casper Ruud experience in real life. He just is a really nice, polite guy who also, I will say, is an undercover sneaky great interview. I don't think people really think of Casper. They don't think of him as like a Roger Federer who is like, he's always going to give you something good. But Casper really does always give you something good. He understands the assignment. He listens to your question. In Dallas, I actually texted his agent after it was over. I was like, his interviews were incredible because he gives you that little anecdote side of things. He gives you specifics. As an interviewer, it's just sort of the nightmare
Yeah.
when somebody just keeps it so general, when you're getting sort of the umbrella view on every single
Yeah.
answer. It's like, give us specifics. And sometimes I can follow up and sort of like yank the specifics out of them. But
Hmm.
Casper gives you the specifics, like telling me he went on a Chinese website to order his
Nose
nose.
and nasal strips. Yeah.
Like, those are the kind of
Yeah.
specifics we want and we need and we love. So thank you, Casper. And it's so cool to see also the fact that he was open about his mental health
Hmm.
and getting help in terms of therapy, and then seeing that pay off on the court is
Hmm.
just so darn cool.
Yeah, the word Paul Annacone used was integrity, and it just speaks volumes. I just view him as just a consummate professional in every sense. How he treats his on-court work, there's never an issue with fitness or taking a match or an opportunity seriously. And also, as you just proved and said, like his off-court professionalism too. So we'll see. There is an opportunity there. And I think the last thing I thought when you were saying all that, because of this, like a breakthrough, we'll see what happens. But, I'm a big hockey fan, and they had, Alex Ovechkin broke the goal record. They had all this pomp and circumstance. People were there. They need to get the weekend there for Casper Ruud for the next big tournament. Just have him on site.
It'd be so cool. I do love, shout out to Madrid, that as
Yeah.
soon as Casper won, they
Hmm.
were playing the weekend. But it is funny you say that, because in Dallas, the day of the final, Casper was at breakfast or like early lunch, whatever you want to call it, and he's sitting at a table with his dad with headphones on doing this. And I'm like, it's gotta be the weekend.
Has to.
Has
Has
to
to.
be.
Well, a few more things here with Blair Henley on the Inside In Tennis podcast. The tennis calendar and the season goes to Rome, the last big stop. And also, fun fact for everybody out there listening, as we were recording this interview, I got the alert that the white smoke's up. So the Pope's going to be named, I think, today. So,
No way.
so the
Big
conclave was short and
breaking
sweet. They
news.
got tennis to watch. Yeah.
That is so crazy.
Which is interesting. It'll be good for the players too. Logistically, I think things will maybe start to open up a little bit. We'll see. But I've always appreciated the pomp and circumstance of Rome, Blair. I just think it's one of the more fascinating tennis tournaments. The crowds are scenes, obviously. They are passionate, as we know, and really, I think the players respond. Some players, I think, respond better than others to that Rome environment.
For sure. And I also think, I think Rome is amazing as a tournament. I don't know how these players are doing it in terms of trying to peak at the right time. I am so not a fan of the 2 week majors. It actually just makes me so sad, just because I keep hoping that maybe it'll change back, but I don't think it's gonna change
Add
back, at
another
least.
one. Add another one to the list. This is the running tally is very much all in agreement, as I am, that Monte Carlo was a breath of fresh air. So was Stuttgart. Like how great these tournaments can be. Qualifying is great. Monday you get great matches. Just feels a little sleepy at times early,
Yes,
and
yes.
the peaking is the big thing, right? Because it's very hard for anybody, especially a top player. I mean, to not have to really play for a few days. You're on site. You're doing the tennis player part without playing tennis.
I don't know how they do it. So at least Rome, for these players who are potentially making deep runs in Rome, there are plenty of things to do and see, and it's a great place to walk around. I don't know if you saw the TikTok from Team Dosa. There was a pretty incredible TikTok that they just did on the streets of Rome. So hopefully players are enjoying the scenery. But I just am looking at the draw today and just thinking, oh my gosh, like we just did
Yeah.
this. We're doing it again in preparation to do it again. And you want the Grand Slam to feel special, and it just doesn't feel as special as it once
Yeah.
did. And if you're Arena Sabalenka, in a perfect world, I would think she would just take Rome off. Go practice, take a
Hmm.
beat, and be ready to make, hopefully a deep run at Roland Garros. But
Yeah.
that's not an option. And I just major respect to the players, because it just seems like it's not only a grind if you do well, it's also a grind if you lose early, because then you have all this time that you have to figure
Yeah.
out where you're going to go, where you're going to train. Are you going to go to Paris? Like, there are just so many
Hmm.
decisions that then have to be made that are logistically more complicated than they used to be. So that's my
Yeah.
TED talk on that.
Sabalenka is incredible, though, to be able to keep winning at a high level, given, how much she has to do with all these tournaments and going deep. And Stuttgart, she didn't even play until I think Saturday, gets to the final, doesn't win that, but then just goes to Madrid. It's the gap is widening, and I do think, Blair, I do think that there's been a lot of speculation about Iga and what's her struggle and her form. We don't have to speculate too much, but I think part of it has to be that there is a real bona fide number one. This is the biggest gap that there's been between her and Sabalenka. And as a top player, you have to feel that. You're human.
Yes. It's such a tough case, right? But
Hmm.
I genuinely do think that she is going to figure it out. I think she's also sort of getting used to this new place in the pecking order. She has proven herself to be a really good front runner, whether we're talking about the
Oh, yeah.
microcosm of a singular match or what she's done over the past 4 years of her tennis career. But there's sort of a new position that she's in, and it creates a sort of stress for her, or it
Hmm.
appears to create a stress for her that isn't a driver. It's more of a sort of a detrimental stress than it is sort of a propelling forward type of stress.
Yeah.
And I think if she can figure that out, and you've heard some players say too, I remember Chris Eubanks after his incredible year that he had, and then he went back out there in 2024 and wasn't able to defend a lot of those points. And once he sort of went through that period past Wimbledon where he just didn't do as well as he'd hoped, wasn't able to back it
Hmm.
up quite as well as he'd hoped, he said, honestly, the worst happened and I'm kind of relieved. Like now I can just keep
Yeah.
going. And in
Right.
some ways, there's that feeling of Iga trying to sort of hang on to
Hmm.
something that is the white knuckling for any human is that's a tough sensation to
Yeah.
deal with well.
It's true. There's the mental strain of being on top and also being, for lack of a better word, targeted. The players are chasing
Yeah.
you. We live in this modern era where there's so much film and data available that you have to evolve. The big three, Serena, they're the best examples of that. You can't play a certain way for 20 years. It's just not going to work. So
Yes. Yeah.
it's,
And you know
yeah,
what? Speaking of Serena, I just had this thought watching Coco. What is it? Was it against Diana Yastremska early in Madrid? That was
yeah,
just
yeah.
really, you know,
Yeah, she
really
survived and then made the
ugly.
final. We brought that up with Paul Anico, and I'm like, that is the lesson for any young athlete. Just get
Yes.
through on a bad day or an average day, and you never know what could happen on tomorrow.
Do you remember though how many tournaments Serena started off like that?
That was the
Where-
joke. Get her early or don't get her at all.
Correct.
Yeah,
I thought it was so
yeah.
Serena-esque what Coco did in Madrid, and she's shown that's not the only time. I think I'm trying to think. I feel like early at the Australian Open there were a couple of ugly wins as well, and she finds a way to get through and sort of works her way in. And that sometimes for Iga is what is missing. Like if it gets ugly, there's no righting the ship.
It was and I was trying to, but it just came to me, the Siegemund match, the US Open she won, starting with that. And then that was I wouldn't say train wreck. It was not a highly high level match, but it
I,
was a
I
win.
was in the Ash booth for that match.
There's
That
a
was,
lot
I
going
think,
on.
I think that might have been my first time as a
Yeah,
voice of God at the U.S. Open was that match, and
yeah.
man, was it stressful.
Coco's growing up too, got
Yeah,
got some pretty famous collabs, is starting her own little agency or management company. So she's
for
growing up
her.
at her still young age. So we love to see that. Well, on the men's side too, I just want to mention with Rome, there's a lot of opportunity for players with, Djokovic out, Alcaraz coming back. We got the return of Jannik Sinner, who I watched that press conference, Blair.
Did
There's a
you?
little edge for Sinner terms. There's a little edge to him that I think he's ready to maybe prove some people wrong. I say that a little in jest that he is such a nice guy, but there's a little motivation I could see behind those words.
I didn't watch the press conference. I did read quotes from it. And I do hope, and I also saw, I think it might have been a tennis TV interview in person. So outside the press conference where he was just
Yeah,
saying he's like legitimately just happy to be back. There's like a
yeah,
internal happiness that he hasn't felt in a while. All of that is great. But I do think prior to everything that happened, and so much of that was going on last year and none of us even knew. But prior to that, he seemed to be opening up in terms of, as a subject of an interview. And I felt like I saw that. I thought his English improved. there was more of a confidence, there was more of a looseness, there was more of us being able to see his sense of humor. And then last year, again, we didn't know why, but there was sort of that closing off again. I will be so interested to see if maybe we can kind of go back on that track of opening up and allowing fans to see more of the sense of humor that I know he has, and just the looseness, because he did for so much of last year and the beginning of this year, there was just a feeling of him being burdened to the point where everything sort of like almost physically closed up.
Yeah. It's one of the greatest examples of compartmentalization I've ever seen, too. Like, if you just take it on its face to just keep winning with all this going on, and it's pretty insane. So,
It legitimately is. Like, if I could do slightly better with that in like my normal everyday life, I would be a much more successful person.
Well, I wanted to end with this because Rome is great, and it is the last Rome for one of our favorites, one of mine, Fabio Fognini. He's lining up a successful career. I was say my mom is like pretty sad about this. He's her favorite player, I think, in a lot of ways. Just the slow saunter of him on court. There really has been nobody like him in a lot of ways. He wins Monte Carlo, married to Flavia Pinetta, has a bunch of kids, but how he played and just his whole persona is what he's going to be remembered for.
Yeah, one of only two people to walk off court and decline an interview with me after a win. So he holds that distinction in my heart. I will never forget it. It was court 4 at Indian Wells. I believe he lost the first set like 6-0. And, you know, he always draws a crowd. And so it's packed. He manages to come back and win it after getting just shellacked in the first set. And it's like, okay, that's a great atmosphere for a post-match interview. Just blows right by me. Like, Fabio, are you okay to do an interview? Nope. Like,
No.
Straight off court, and people are looking at me like, where's the interview? I'm like, there's nothing I can do about this. Like, they don't have to stay and be interviewed. But yeah, no one else like him.
Nobody.
And when he was playing well, the ball striking, because it never really looked like he should be in good position.
He's not bending his knees. Like, he's just out for a Sunday stroll.
Yeah, when you think about live arm type players, he is one of the top on my list athletes, because he just always sort of looked like he was slapping at it, and yet the ball did what he wanted it to do, and he was really effective. I mean, he had a pretty decent record against Rafa, didn't he?
Yeah, a couple wins in there.
Yeah, I mean, decent against Rafa, but yeah, no, we will miss him, if only for the entertainment value, because he did always bring that.
Brought so much. This was always is a blast, Blair Henley, talking tennis with you. And I should also get your thoughts out the door. The Nadal tribute at Roland Garros. Do we think it's going to be just spectacular? Do you think it'll get the bad taste from some of his team members from the Davis Cup failed tribute out of its way? But what to expect from the Rafa tribute at Roland Garros?
One quick aside on our last topic, I will say, as much as I like the Fognini entertainment value, there were absolutely questionable, egregious judgment call choices along the way. So,
of course, yeah, not perfect
on the Fabio Fognini side of things, but I think that Roland Garros is going to do this well. They've had enough time to prepare. I think it should be great. And there's precedent too, because I remember, was it all the Frenchmen last year? Tsonga, was it Tsonga? I always half remember these details.
Yeah, Gasquet's retiring too, so yeah.
Yes. So they have had precedent in terms of doing these events and doing them well. And I just think it is going to be tear jerking. I'm ready. I'm ready for Rafa tears. I think they're just going to be tears.
Yeah. It's going to be tough, and I wonder too, with Federer, Nadal, we'll see Djokovic, how much they're going to be involved in the game. Like, there's no guarantee that they're going to be commentators and around. They could, on the scale from I'd say Jim Courier, because I know him a little bit, to Pete Sampras. Yeah. Where is the level of involvement in the game? I don't know, but that's up for them to decide.
I hope it is a lot. Speaking of Roger Federer, I just must tell you that I was talking to my 93-year-old grandmother yesterday, who lives in a little South Florida condo community. And she said, I have something to tell you. And I said, Graham, tell me what it is. Apparently, she's like, Roger and his whole family are staying in my little condo.
You're just like, time to go. Booking the flight now.
Yes,
I've always wanted to spend more time with you.
the neighborhood gossip mill. She's like, people have been calling me saying, go outside. They're outside.
That's so funny.
Apparently Roger is in Florida at the moment, or was this past week. So shout out to Graham for giving me the tennis gossip, the latest location update on Roger Federer.
Awesome. And before we get fact corrected in the comments, Fognini 4-14 versus Nadal. Phenomenal record compared to some of his peers, but 4-14. Blair, this was a blast. Where are we going to see you next? What's the next assignment?
Well, you can find me at the Tyler, Texas Challenger in the first week of June. I'm going to go get some commentary reps, and then I will be at the Newport Combined 125, also doing commentary there. So trying to do a little bit more on the commentary side of things before we get into the MC stuff, possibly Canada, and then US Open, and then who knows what after that. But I encourage everyone to come to the Hall of Fame. It is the absolute best. They redid the museum in advance of the Bryan brothers and Sharapova being inducted, which is the first weekend now of the US Open. But come this summer, see some grass court tennis, go see the new museum, and come visit me.
We can't wait to see. It's going to be a blast. Women's tennis at Newport. Blair Henley, always funny and always fun. And and there's also, rumblings of musical talent in your own household. So we know that as well. Joke's on you, because the Patrick Macro intel from, there's some talented musicians in his family. Now you have taste your own medicine.
I don't know that I'm going to be duetting with them anytime soon. But yes, I have 2 ukulele players in my household. Thank you, Mitch.
Blair Henley, this was a blast. Thanks so much for giving us time here on the podcast. It's always a pleasure, and I can't wait to chat again soon.
Thanks, Mitch.
That was Blair Henley. This was the Inside In Tennis Podcast. Again, we're available on all your podcast platforms. Go to Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Amazon Music, as well as the YouTube channel at Mitch Michals for full video episodes of this and all the episodes of the podcast. We're back in a few days to talk more tennis, gear up for Roland Garros, and drop some pretty special interviews as well. So for Blair Henley, I'm Mitch Michals. This was the Inside In Tennis Podcast. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.